Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this brand new episode of the Clear to Send podcast. I am your host, Roel Dionisio. My co-host, Francois, was unable to make it on this recording, but given that he did a couple of solo episodes and I'm back from vacation, I'm going to take this one myself. And I just got back a couple days ago from Paris in France, so it was a lovely trip that just me and my wife did. For our anniversary, we left the kids with my parents, so this was our first vacation in Europe first time in Europe, but of a vacation, just the two of us in a long time since we've had kids. So I thought it was a very refreshing time, about 6-7 days without the kids, very different, and we were able to relax a little and also enjoy the sights in Paris and eat a lot of great food. I am a big foodie, so I did eat quite a lot and had many bottles of wine, and I clearly enjoyed it if you ever follow my photos on Instagram. One of the things I noticed is that not a lot of places have great Wi-Fi in Paris, which is kind of a shame. And I stayed at the Westin Hotel in the Vendôme area, and clearly their Wi-Fi design is all hallway based, because I would be near the window of my room where we had a beautiful view of the Eiffel Tower, which was kind of a distance, but it was still a great view nonetheless. And both my phone and my laptop had a very difficult time trying to connect to the wireless network, and my laptop for sure, which was surprising, had a very bad time connecting. And my phone did a decent job. And being that I tried not to use the international data that much, I just couldn't connect, have a good signal. It was really a signal strength issue, because my laptop was seeing the signal at around negative 72 to 76, which was pretty bad, especially when I just wanted to simply download some images and wanted to see where I was going to go around the city. So it's a common design for hotels to place them in the hallways, because every time we were in the hallway, my phone had the strongest signal. And so one of the things that needs to be re-looked at for hospitality is to place those APs in the room if you can, because that's where the users are, especially if they're going to be near the edge, the far end of the room, farthest away from the AP. It's just a terrible choice to make. And sure, it makes it easy to install with cabling, but all that money is wasted when users can barely use the wireless network, except for when they're in the hallways and maybe in the lobby. But other than that, I tried not to go on Wi-Fi that much and explored wherever I could. One of the museums we saw, or I saw, an access point outdoors. It was omnidirectional, and at that time there was a lot of people outside in line trying to get inside. So I assume we were all trying to use Wi-Fi. I clearly was. The Wi-Fi network was pretty good. It was the Extreme APs, which I mistakenly thought it was a different vendor, but I think there were about a couple hundred people outside trying to get in. It was rainy, so we're all trying to get into a museum, but the Wi-Fi was pretty good, and saw that they had placed about 4 omnidirectional access points across the front of the entrance of the museum. I thought it was a lot for omnidirectional, but hey, worked out for me. Maybe there weren't that many people on wireless, but my connection was pretty good. But now that I'm back, I'm trying to look into the latest Cisco Catalyst 9800 iOS XE based wireless LAN controller. So I got my hands on that and was able to, after some struggling, trying to install the virtual edition on my Intel NUC. Now, one of the problems I ran into was my Intel NUC is a little bit older, so it's an i3. It's great for running some basic VMs. It doesn't have a lot of space, and neither does it have a lot of memory. It's 8 gigs of RAM. But I was able to get it installed, but I had a problem. Once I started up the VM, it ran into an issue where it just ate up all the resources on my Intel NUC. It got to the point where I got to the auto install portion, and when I hit no, I would lose all connectivity. I would also lose connectivity to my VMware host, where the Catalyst 9800 runs as a virtual machine. So I'm running ESXi, the hypervisor version 6.7, and what I had to do was switch to an Intel NUC running i7, and after that, it ran very smooth. So I could add a link into the show notes to show you which Intel NUC I used if you are planning on deploying this in a lab environment, just to get familiar with it. And I'm hoping that in a future episode, I can speak about my experience when it comes to deploying the iOS XE based wireless LAN controller. Now, I know a lot of people think that this is probably the same thing as converged. It's not quite. The GUI is definitely different. There's a lot more features as well. There was also a lot of limitations to the converged version of the wireless LAN controller. So this one, it's very feature rich. There's a lot of features. A lot of the configurations have been moved around. So we're looking at a whole new GUI and also a different model for configuration. So I'll touch upon those in a future episode once I get more familiar. I've only been into this about 3 days now, and I got 2 APs connected and switched the whole home lab over to using this controller just to get more familiar with it and see what it's all about. So I'll post a link to the Intel NUC on the show notes page. I believe that'll be cleartosend.net/149, which will be our latest episode, because our episode this week is going to be something that I've written before. It's, from my point of view, the 6 characteristics of high-performing WLANs. So we'll get into that shortly. And so one of the things, before we talk about the main topic here, if you have trouble installing the OVA file in VMware and you're using the ESXi hypervisor, you're going to have to deploy that differently because we're using the web-based version of VMware. It doesn't install properly, or you don't even get all the way through to installation. When you try to do the OVA file, you have to use a command line tool called Ovf Tool, and it'll deploy that, deploy the VM for you on your VMware server. And so I'll end up talking about that in a future episode as well, because I will go through the installation a couple of times just to get used to it, and also to get used to this configuration model where you're actually using tags to configure your wireless network, especially if you've got multi-site or various different settings or parameters that you need to install to different APs. So you're going to have to use tags. And just to give you a insight into these tags, these tags are the RF tag, the policy tag, and the site tag. And you also have to work with profiles, which will be assigned to certain tags, and those profiles target the AP radio and the WLAN settings. So right now it's pretty interesting, just getting around to playing with it. I didn't read into the configuration guide thoroughly, only because it is a large configuration guide, hundreds of pages long. It could be probably larger than the new CWNA study guide from from Cybex. So it's a pretty big installation configuration guide. So this episode is going to be a little bit short, as to be honest, I didn't have that much time to prepare for it. I've been quite busy with a lot of work and doing a lot of design and some configuration. So one of the things I wanted to talk about were 6 different characteristics of high-performing WLANs, because Wi-Fi networks were originally built with just coverage in mind, and access points were installed in rooms where it was known that you needed Wi-Fi. But obviously, as businesses have changed and evolved, they began migrating from Ethernet to just completely Wi-Fi only infrastructure. So this made Wi-Fi a mission critical service to all these different business objectives. So in the city of San Francisco, very busy city, lots of different businesses and high rises, a very tech-centric business that I worked with relied on Wi-Fi for all operations, including accessing all the cloud resources that is critical to their business. And so this was a Wi-Fi only office, accessing everything in the cloud. Uploading and downloading traffic patterns began slowing down Wi-Fi, and so to help increase their productivity and to take advantage of the investment they put into their wireless infrastructure, I helped plan and design a wireless network where the end users saw that increase, and their end user experience just increased dramatically. And so one of the things that I seeing all these different wireless networks in the city of San Francisco, the San Francisco Bay Area, I want to talk about these 6 characteristics. That's going to be planning and design, reliability, security, a good end user experience, designed for capacity, insight, those sort of characteristics. And so as I go into some of these in a little bit more detail, the planning and design is the most important, because it's like building a house, right? Or a building. You don't just start building it and make it up as you go. You have a plan and you create a design, right, to have a successful structure in place. And so you don't just randomly select areas on the ceiling and say, here's where I'm going to put an access point, one over here, one over there, because this is really just a recipe for disaster. To deploy a high performing wireless network in which a workforce heavily relies on requires more than just guesswork. It requires a proper design, which begins with gathering requirements. And those requirements can be many different types of requirements. You've got your business requirements, your technical requirements, and then there's also requirements from the end users, because we all know the end users use the wireless network very differently than how management envisions that it should be used. So when it comes to upgrading the core network, the Wi-Fi network must also be treated the same, because I find that a lot of people put effort into planning and designing the core wired infrastructure part, and then they treat Wi-Fi as just some secondary service that we can just put up access points and it'll work. Now, I think given in some scenarios, maybe some small offices, that may work, where you don't need a design or you don't need much planning. You buy a decent access point and it could get the job done. But as you add more people, more devices, your business operations become more complex, or whatever applications you're using put a strain on your wireless network, then that's when you start to see a performance hit, because there was no plan, there was no design that fit that need or that growth. So treat Wi-Fi as an extension of the wired network, plan and design, because design is a result of very thorough planning. It requires understanding how the wireless network is going to be used, what devices will be utilizing that wireless network, and how many of those devices, and also what kind of applications are going to be used. This is not an exhaustive list of questions to ask, but it's a good starting point. But the end result of planning and design will be a wireless network built for a productive end user experience, something that they would expect to use and utilize without any or many issues. So planning up front will lay down the foundations to a wireless network designed to fit the business needs. A wireless network must be designed for mobile workforce, right? Everyone's mobile. Everyone wants to move around. They use their phones or their tablets. They're constantly moving from meeting to meetings, or I don't know if you've seen a lot of the offices in San Francisco. They're very fancy, so they have these special work areas, and then the construction of these work areas are over the top, and so a lot of people like to sit in these special areas, and just maybe it wasn't designed for that kind of mobile workforce, but that's something to consider. So the technical professional, the wireless network engineer, must have an in-depth Wi-Fi knowledge and understanding of the knobs required to tune on your wireless system for that specific environment. And the high-performing wireless network will be designed so that there's less trouble tickets. One of the goals that I aim for when working with other companies is to decrease the amount of help desk calls or decrease the number of tickets, so that way the IT team can then focus on actual key critical pieces of the company rather than trying to put out fires or trying to create workarounds around a poor performing wireless network. Just actually get down to the root of it and fix it with a proper plan and design. And so that way the things they need to consider are the capability of those devices using the wireless network, the capacity needs of that environment, and also capacity areas, because certain areas have different capacity needs. And then also for the high density of devices, just because there are a sheer amount of devices that are using wireless now, especially with that explosive growth of IoT and everyone just wanting to put everything on the wireless network, because cabling does cost a lot more. So the second characteristic here is that the wireless network needs to be reliable. So accessing information quickly and easily on any wireless device drives this mobile workforce. And Wi-Fi is now the primary access, and we're not seeing too many wired unless it has to be wired, right? There are devices that have to be wired, but then we will see them be used wirelessly. So businesses have been migrating from Ethernet to an all wireless infrastructure. So that means the wireless infrastructure must be reliable. And that also starts with working on your wired network. That's where it begins. Having a well-designed and configured backbone network that supports the wireless network. And so that redundancy builds upon a robust wireless infrastructure, preventing any major outages, considering things like battery backups, which can be critical, especially in areas where power can be a little unstable, or you may have prolonged power outages, for example. But then if people are able to work wirelessly off their battery powered devices, you could still help recover some of those lost productivity when the power goes out. So you like I said, prevent that lost productivity, but also the lost potential revenue because of a power outage. So you want to ensure that the wireless network is built with good backend infrastructure, and the reliable wireless network must be capable of adapting to the frequency environment there, the RF environment. it must react to some of the adverse effects from neighboring wireless networks or interference from another productivity killer, which a wireless network needs to identify and mitigate. So features such as like Cisco's RRM or their clean air, if you tune the knobs correctly, can help mitigate some of those problems you might see on a wireless network. Maybe a persistent interfering device that just crops up on a channel that's your AP is operating on. Can your wireless network be reliable and move away from that source of interference so that way your users aren't affected? And there's other things to look at when it comes to providing a reliable network, because with these people relying so much on cloud applications, maintaining a reliable wireless network is just key for maintaining an infrastructure that helps boost business growth, right? So the third characteristic is security. So we're seeing that mobile traffic is just growing like exponentially, and there's no avoiding that this penetration of IoT devices that will overtake the enterprise and bring in different types of innovations on that'll utilize the wireless network. It just also leaves us wondering how secure these IoT devices are, and they're on your wireless networks. So the IoT devices may drive innovation, but that data must be kept secure and away from unauthorized access, and it just needs to be blocked or mitigated somehow. So a high-performing wireless network must only allow trusted devices to this authorized data. And so properly segmenting these networks is just one of many steps. A wireless network must identify things like rogue access points and devices with a method of containing those threats quickly, but not doing it illegally. And we've seen security issues like TJ Maxx back in 2007, where they had that cyber security breach of their credit card data because of weak Wi-Fi security. And you don't want your company or client to be that next headline because of poor security over your wireless network. So things like pre-shared keys may be convenient, but everyone knows that password, and when a device or a person leaves a company, that password should change, but that password often doesn't change because of the inconvenience factor associated with it, having to go to every or touch every device and change that password. So you could look at more secure methods, maybe using things like identity PSK or personal PSK, or stepping it up further and using 802.1x. Now that may add some complexity, but you got to counter that with how much could we lose potentially if we have a breach or if something breaks through the wireless security. So the next characteristic here is a good end user experience. Ultimately, it comes down to how the end users see and use the wireless network. Does it work for them, right? Are they complaining? Is it slow? We may use all these fancy design softwares like using a Sidekick and then saying, yeah, I gathered all this data, everything looks good. But from an end user perspective, is it good? That is the real test. Because in today's world, everyone is accessing the cloud all the time. Wi-Fi, again, is that primary method of access to any network resource. So people are carrying up to 3 or 4 devices at a time and needing to get their work done from any of those devices. So to give them that productivity and have them effectively collaborate with others and get their work done, you can't have a slow or unresponsive wireless network, that must not happen at all. So a very well performing wireless network always goes back to reliability, and increase in reliability will boost the end user's productivity. So users can perform their work anywhere in the office on any device. Their voice calls are often done over Wi-Fi calling, for example, because some of the buildings just have a lack of LTE signal coming into the building. And also users are using video conferencing all the time, and streaming is just putting a strain on the wireless network. So you got to plan for these workloads to help give that good end user experience. And so that's always key, and always something that needs to be looked, that the key indicator of how a wireless network is performing. Now, another characteristic here is designing for capacity. Now, it used to be coverage. We usually just want to provide coverage everywhere, but now we need to design for capacity, and not just capacity for the whole building. You have different capacity areas because coverage is a given. And so as people begin working in the office, like at early hours, the Wi-Fi network will be just humming, right? There's hardly anyone on it. But as people begin to fill in the seats, some start noticing maybe degradation in the Wi-Fi service because more and more people come in. More devices are in a single floor because everyone's carrying 3 to 4 wireless devices. And the types of applications that they're using are putting a hit on the performance of the wireless network. So if a wireless network is designed according to requirements, it will perform as expected. But without planning for capacity, that just equates to planning for failure. So other factors must be taken into consideration. In addition to planning for capacity, APs must be mounted properly, antennas aligned in the right direction. It is all based on the usage and capacity requirements of the work patterns in your environment, or whichever environment you're working on. Now, the last characteristic I have here is insight. How do we know if a wireless network is how it is performing? Is the IT support staff armed with the right tools to understand the state of the Wi-Fi network? Now, analytics can provide some valuable insight into how the Wi-Fi network is being used and to what capacity. And this information can lead to further optimizations and hopefully better end user experience. Now, the analytics can empower the IT support staff to troubleshoot more quickly when issues arise, because the data lends itself to measuring end user experience across for example, an entire network stack. And nowadays it's all about trying to get to the solution faster. And so we're using tools that give us that insight to get us to the root cause and fix the issue quickly. So with powerful information on hand, it can improve that root cause analysis and also decrease the length and time spent during that investigation process and improve time to resolution, right? So you also have staff that just can't or doesn't have the expertise to solve these types of issues quickly over any Wi-Fi type issue. And oftentimes it's not really a Wi-Fi issue. It just seems like a Wi-Fi issue, but getting to the point that actually tells you here's where the problem is, that's where that troubleshooting expertise, that troubleshooting knowledge is not there in a lot of different teams. And so having the insight that can help drive someone to that conclusion and provide a end user with a solution is going to be very helpful. And that's what a lot of the business leaders really want, is for this type of characteristic to be in place and to help just fix a lot more issues faster. So in conclusion, the Wi-Fi networks are now more complex than ever. The and the six characteristics again are starting with a plan and design based on requirements of the business and the end users. The reliability to ensure devices can connect when they need to. You have security, which should be thought of starting from the beginning of the design rather than in the end. And Wi-Fi network should provide a good end user experience, less frustrations. It should be built for capacity as more devices are brought onto the Wi-Fi network, and should be monitored to investigate any issues, find any trends, and just to be proactive. And so those are the six characteristics of high performing wireless networks. There must be many more characteristics, and I'm sure you got some. So if you could head over to the show notes, cleartosend.net/149, and leave a comment there of what other characteristics you believe are high performing or of high performing wireless networks. I would appreciate it, and help share it with other people too, other listeners. And one thing I want to leave with here, I just received an email from Keith Parsons, and I wanted to share this out with everyone as well, because he's opening up a survey to gather information about current compensation in the wireless community. And so he's going to open it up for 5 days between December 3rd through December 7th. And so the more people you have doing this survey, the more accurate the results will be. And so this year, he says they're adding new questions to get more granular with geography. And I think this type of survey, the way Keith does the survey, is very well done. I did it last year. The response and the results from last year's compensation benchmark were really interesting, and you get to see what it really looks like in the wireless community, how we get paid, and according to also some characteristics of certain types of workers, how that increase in that curve, what kind of people are getting paid more, right? Like, one of the things I noticed from last year is the more you traveled, the higher your compensation was. And so it's things like that. So I wanted to share that out because last year the compensation benchmark from Keith Parsons, they got over 1,000 responses, which is really good. And I'm hoping maybe we can get more out there. And so this will be available for you to fill out this survey by the time you hear this podcast, December 3rd through to December 7th of 2018. And I'm going to create a special link for this in the show notes, because over audio, it's a little bit difficult to say the link. So if you go to cleartosend.net/compensation benchmark, that's all one word, that will go to Keith Parsons. It will redirect you to the survey itself. So once again, that's cleartosend.net/compensation benchmark. So there you have it. That is our show for today. I hope you enjoyed this one. And if you have any questions, concerns, comments, head over to the show notes, cleartosend.net/149. And if you found this episode useful, do help us out and review us on iTunes. I always like to see what people think about our show, how we can do better or improve it in any way. You can also review us at cleartosend.net/iTunes. We would greatly appreciate it. And we look forward to just delivering more content to you guys and helping out the community as best as we could. So once again, my name is Roel Dionisio. I'm your host, and I will see you guys on the next episode.